Hey.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good day. Welcome to
Good
Toque
day,
Talk.
eh?
Good day.
Good day, eh? Toque Talk. What's going on? I just kind of.
Freezing cold.
Oh
cold
yeah,
up
you're
here.
in Winnipeg. Tell us all about that,
Yes.
because I want to live
Well,
vicariously through you.
it's around
Because
that
the weather
time of
is so
year.
terrible here right now.
I know.
Yeah. It's freezer face off cold. You don't go outside because
No.
you'll die, and so that's about it. So
It's like a Vegas summer. Just yeah.
yeah, exactly. No, it's
Your car may or may not start depending on the weather. Anything can happen.
That's right. No, we've been spoiled. I mean, obviously we had a little bit of a mild winter to start, but old man winter decided to remind us that he's always there, and
He always does.
It's freezing cold. So
whenever my Canadian friends start to kind of go, well, dude, it's totally mild, I go, dude, just wait. Wait. It's coming.
Yeah.
It always manages to find a way. I see Fitz has a Schitt's Creek shirt on.
Nice.
I see that too. Yeah.
That's dope AF.
Did you see him, Dan Levy on SNL?
I haven't
I want to
watched
talk
it
about
yet.
that.
I'm
did?
so
Yeah.
excited that Dan
And
is
we
like.
won't talk about it.
I'm so excited that Dan is doing that level of stuff, because that show it's a bit of a sleeper. Like, it took me a couple episodes. Like, everybody kept telling me, you haven't watched that yet? And I'm like, I know. I'm a huge Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, like that SCTV thing. I'm like, of course, I love those people. But, it's like I've only got 6 or 7 shows on the go at a time. So once one of those slots fell out, then I had to fill it with. And it took me a couple episodes where I was like, what's the rage about this show? And then, like, within the 3rd episode, I'm like, boom, I'm in. David, the whole thing. I'm just like fully in, and I think Dan is incredible. I think he really, to me, is the standout on that show. I think he steals the entire thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
Catherine O'Hara is insane on that show, of course, but
Yeah, but I think everybody would agree with you that what follows that show, Saturday Night Live, we did watch, and it's in typical Saturday Night Live fashion. He's great, but some of the writing is just, I don't know. It reminds me.
It's always that way. Yeah,
it reminds me of that Krusty the Clown skit when he was on there in The Simpsons. Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, we got 17 more minutes of this."
SNL is such a fascinating thing because, I'm one of those guys that's invested, and I used to literally watch every single one I could my whole life. And then it wasn't until more recent years that I became too busy to have officially been watching live every Saturday night because we were on the road or whatever we were doing. So I kind of fell out. I still kind of tune in, but it's an amazing achievement to imagine writing and putting on a show within 7 days. And it's live, you know what I mean? Like, it's an insane achievement that they can get even one sketch to be funny at all. Is like, they're filled with an amazing amount of talent.
Yeah.
But it's an insane, when you watch like anything or hear any of the stories behind the scenes, how, dog eat dog it can be.
This is what my life has become now.
Who's Dave?
Yeah.
Dave is my brother, but
Dave Steen.
Yeah. I'm assuming that that was directed towards me. I'm known as Dave's brother.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, in certain circles, we're all somebody's brother.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But speaking of Saturday Night Live, did anybody catch the Wayne's World commercial on the Super Bowl?
I heard about it. Yeah, I didn't see it. No, I don't.
Yeah, those that brought back some memories, obviously, of.
There was some sort of sporting event yesterday that wasn't hockey, so I don't really know. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago, Sunday. Yeah.
There were some beer commercials and things like that, and then there was a game was played of some sort. So that's exciting. Was that yesterday? No, it's 2 days ago.
Sunday.
Yeah.
On my Instagram, somebody had sent me a photo, and it was Tom Brady and his family, wife and kids.
Yeah.
And his kid was full hockey regalia, and they were going to hockey practice. I mean, isn't that the best?
I know.
I think the quote was, "Yeah, Tom Brady knows what real sport is actually hockey," or something like that.
Where does he live officially? That his kid's playing
Tom Brady?
hockey? Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that they would live in Tampa now, and I mean Tampa Bay has a great hockey team. So
True,
Yeah.
But
I see behind Fitz's head, you'll see, if you move your head slightly one way or the other, you'll see the Beatles. 57 years ago today, the Beatles played on the Ed Sullivan Show. 57 years ago today. Yeah. So, and that is ground zero, the Big Bang. Like, when I talk to all my older friends, it's like whenever you ask, so how did you get into this? It's always the same answer. It's always, well, the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, and the next day everybody had a band. You know, it's like literally everybody picked up a guitar, everybody. And it's a tough one to really understate, because prior to the Beatles, people weren't really writing their own songs. Buddy Holly wrote his own songs. I don't think people talk about that enough. Buddy Holly wrote and recorded his own songs. But largely it was very, very common that pop artists, Elvis, whoever, sang other people's songs. And the Beatles came along, just 4 guys from Liverpool. They may as well have been from Moose Jaw. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah, they might as well have been. I saw Jeff Neal posted something online today, and I might misquote, but it said something to the extent of Bing Crosby was intimidated by Frank Sinatra. Frank was intimidated by Elvis. Elvis was intimidated by the Beatles. And the Beatles have been intimidated by nobody for the last 50 years.
True.
You know,
pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
So
A lot of people probably came along and said they were going to be the new Beatles, but that never really happened, did it?
Yeah. Well, the Monkees, they had a run at it, but
they had a run. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Until today,
yeah.
Toque's here, baby. It's on. We're taking it all back.
I saw one of my buddies, Gary from Winnipeg. He commented on your post, Todd, today about the Beatles, and he was like, "I'm more of a Ruddles fan."
I saw that. It was so dry. It was like, like it was not even worth engaging, because you're like, just leave that one alone. Let people kind of like, Ruddles. What the hell are the Ruddles? Let them go down that rabbit hole themselves. The Monty Python, Eric Idle as the Paul McCartney, and etc. Yeah, it was insane. All you need is cash was their song.
And of course, on that note, speaking of fantastic bands, we've got a Prairie Legend coming up here, and so we should probably get on that while addressing that Shane is absent today. So Shane had
is it sad that none of us noticed?
No, don't say that.
I'm just kidding.
We all miss him dearly.
We were all talking about it before we went live. Yes.
Yeah, no, just scheduling conflict with Shane, so we will see him next week. But in the meantime, who wants to do the honors today and bring on our guest?
I'll do the honors.
Okay.
These guys were a massive deal to anybody who grew up in our neck of the woods, because these guys were from Saskatchewan, around the Saskatoon. Saskatoon, I think, was their home base. So watching, like the Queen City Kids a generation before that, or however many years before that, it was sort of like that was a touchstone. And then seeing the Pikes kind of take off was kind of that, wow, hey, we can do this. We can actually get in the game. You know what I mean? And their shadow loomed large over that whole scene. And Jay is he's in the Western Canada Music Hall of Fame. He did soundtrack and score work for Due South, a very popular Canadian show. Amazing dude, and a very integral member of the Northern Pikes. Make some noise for Jay Semko.
Yay! Welcome, Jay.
Hey,
I know that's only 3 or 4 guys applauding, but I've played to smaller audiences. Let's be honest here.
Me too.
Yeah.
In fact, I can tell you the last gig that the Northern Pikes did in Saskatoon before we signed our record deal with Virgin Records, it was a gig that nobody came to.
Oh no!
We played 2 nights in a sort of an all ages club, and it was, I don't remember the name of it, but it was a basement downtown. And the first night, and it was really cold weather, and we kind of played the hell out of Saskatoon. We played like almost too much, and
right.
The weather was bad. And the first night, there were two ladies came who we knew that were servers at this other bar that we had played in fairly regularly. And then the next day, no one came. Absolutely no one. There was nobody there. It was the
Don't you
weirdest
love that?
thing. The sound guy, the guy who was doing sound with us, Al Vicarious, was a great musician unto himself. We had a lot of fun. Every time I see him, we still talk about that. It was sort of it was a weird time, But we have played gigs where nobody came, and
our first trip east, the Age of Electric, were playing like different clubs, and we had a little bit of a thing going on, but we'd never been as far into Ontario. And I remember playing in Sudbury, Ontario, and I remember mostly because of the Stompin' Tom song, Sudbury Saturday Night, which everybody should Google immediately or YouTube that. But I remember playing the show, and there was like one guy sitting at the bar, like literally one person in the bar. There was a bar staff, and this guy at the bar. And then as we're playing, some argument ensues with the bartender, and they get into a fight. They throw that guy out. Now there's 0 people in the bar. Now it's just like literally bartenders. That was it. So we've all been there. So,
do you remember when you'd play in the bar scene, and if it was a situation like that where there were more employees than there were customers, you actually didn't have to get up on stage by union rules?
Oh, is that for real?
It was like, so it was pretty awesome, because then it was like, well, there's more people in the band than there are people in the audience, so we don't have to get up and play.
But I feel like I feel lucky in fact that I kind of grew up, I guess, in the 70s and was able to go out and play the bars and do that circuit where you play either 3 or 6 nights a week, because it was a great way to kind of get better at what you did. When I look at people like my son plays in a couple of bands, and I mean, they haven't been playing, for the last year, obviously, but they they never play 2 nights in a row. It's always one-nighters. They never. Whereas when you'd go out and it was just really good for your chops. The first 3 nights people would come and check you out depending on where you were, and you maybe have the back 3 were obviously more. That's where you try and pack them in, kind of thing. But just that whole rehearsal thing of being able to to play every night, because it is different. It is different. Like, you can, and I always found that it was sort of like, it's like being in a sports team. I mean, you can practice and practice and practice, but when you're in a real game, it's just kind of different. It's the same thing when you're playing live, and just all those factors and all those things that you guys all know about, where sometimes you got to play when you feel really sick. Sometimes you got to play when you're super tired, all those things that add up to making you better, better musician, better performer, I guess, for lack of
and playing
word.
In front of people. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing to play in your basement with each other, and you can get really good, but it's a whole other game when because people don't even know what level of stage fright they have until they step onto the stage, and having to deal with like a guitar string has broken, or that cable went out, or whatever it is. It's like, it's all those things like game day, like you said, like when you're in the game and there's no kind of like, stop, let's do that song again. It's kind of like, it's just happening now. So we have to kind of deal with it.
Well, or to go back to what we were talking about earlier, and obviously being in Canada, especially in the prairies, nothing like those long drives in -50 and having vehicle problems, getting to those gigs and doing all that stuff. I mean, all the glory that goes along with that, right?
Oh, I'm 100%. Yeah, I know but that says a lot. So going back to when you guys started out, because the cool thing for me has always been watching you guys do your thing. Because no matter what we did, it was always, well, the Pikes did this, or the Pikes are doing that, or the Pikes recorded here, the Pikes put out their stuff and they did it this way. And you kind of, in a lot of ways, it's sort of very sort of like cottage industry, DIY. You guys were basically an alternative in a sense, college act in a way like that. I read the whole thing about you guys actually you personally got a hold of like all the college radio addresses and were actually physically snail mailing tapes or whatever to people and getting stuff actually. Is this pre being signed you were doing this?
Yes, we did. We did 2 independent albums. One was just called The Northern Pikes. It has 6 songs on it. It came out in 1984. And then in 85, we did a second one. It's called Scene in North America, SCENE, because we were crafty.
Right. Clever. That's very clever.
That is clever.
And we did those, but we were very lucky in some ways, from the point of view that a good buddy and one of my best friends, Mitch Barnett, was a recording engineer, and he worked at this place called Studio West, which was,
I know it well.
Yeah, out near Pike Lake, of all places, just outside of the city of Saskatoon. And he was the engineer there. And so he would sometimes kind of sneak us out in the middle of the night to just bang off some demo recordings. And he would get really good deals for us to go in and record, money wise. So our whole goal from square one with the Pikes was recording. We figured that, try and write good songs and make recordings and get them out there, because we just didn't, we couldn't see another way. And it really, I'm talking like back in the, when I got out of high school, I think that was maybe the first year that they had like cable TV in the city and stuff. And it's funny, you guys were talking about Saturday Night Live. And I remember Pike Merle, because Merle and I have been buddies since we were in grade 8. And I would go to Merle's house whenever Saturday Night Live was on. This was in the early first days of Saturday Night Live, because you didn't see live rock music very often on television.
No.
Whereas there's such a proliferation now. You can go anywhere and see anything you want really on YouTube or anywhere. But back then you just rarely saw it. So we just lived for that. And then you could see, I remember seeing bands that I had heard about, and then seeing them live, bands like the Talking Heads or different groups that showed up on SNL, and it was like really quite neat. Like it was quite an influence in some ways. And you just, as a kid, as a teenager, you're just soaking all this up. It's just this absorbing this stuff. Oh, look what he's doing there, and it was kind of. There was also a show that used to come on the local radio station, on the rock radio station. Eventually, we had a college station here, which is C-Juice, which evolved into CFCR, which is the station that I do my show on here. But it was one of those things where they had a show, and it was from the BBC, and it played every Friday from noon to 12:15 at lunchtime. And it was jam-packed with music news, like from the UK and different things. And that's how I first heard about like the Sex Pistols and, different kinds of things that I hadn't really been exposed to along the way. And it was sort of so those things, I remember those quite clearly, And then once the college radios started happening, that was really cool too, because it was really loose, and you could hear anything, anytime on there, and you could hear a lot of different kind of independent.
You said something interesting when we first started, before we went live, and you were talking about doing a radio show. Most often now, radio DJs, are just kind of following format. They don't really get a say in what they play necessarily. And of course, going back years ago when, like you said, kids, ourselves included, would be influenced, and you'd be listening to TV and radio, finding out about all those new artists. Now, you were saying that you have control over what you play on your station. Do you use that as a platform to introduce new bands, or tell us a little bit more about your show?
Yeah, the show's called The Songwriters. It's on every Tuesday from 1 till 2 Saskatchewan time. It's interesting. I have quite a following over in Europe. Wow. And that's, I think, as a result of working on the TV show Due South, which was it's a syndicated show, etc., and it plays around the world. And they've had these conventions, which are called RCW 139, which is the license plate Ray's car in the show. They're hardcore fans. These are people that are really into it, but literally all over the world. And they would come to these conventions, and I've been to a couple of them, and I met some of the people, and we've stayed in touch. And so I know that every time I do the show, I have a bunch of friends in Sweden and the UK and Germany that listen every week, because it's in the evening there. I guess that's the difference. It's sort of 1 o'clock here is like 8 or 9 o'clock over there, sort of thing. Sure, yeah. I play a wide variety of stuff, and I really love the fact that I can play anything. Like today, I kind of talked a little bit about the song "Born Free" from the movie, Academy Award-winning movie.
Love that song.
And that song won actually Best Original Song in 1966 in the Academy Awards. And then the other one I played was "Bridge on the River Kwai," the theme. Colonel Bogey
with Sir Alec Guinness, who went on to be
and William Holden, and so I played that. But at the same time, I played a really long instrumental track from Beaches called Mutual. It's called Mutual Delirium. And then I played a long one by Black Mountain.
Right.
And then I played I played a song from the Byrds.
Cool.
And I usually do feature a lot of new music. And I've got to say, there's a lot of really good music being recorded right here, right in Saskatchewan right now. And there's a number of artists that are really doing well. Like I can think of, just off the top of my head, like Megan Nash, Belle Plaine would be a couple right off the top that are making serious waves all over the place and touring the world and that kind of thing.
There's a band called Belle Plaine, or is it a person?
She's a person, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Her stage persona is Belle Plaine, yeah.
I go through Belle Plaine every time from Moose Jaw to Regina. That's the
Yeah.
There you go.
almost the halfway mark. What a
Yeah.
great name.
That's great.
Yeah,
her.
well, you know, it's funny. I love discovering new music. Oh, another thing I played today, and this is cool. This is cool. This is a good example to me of how new bands are finding different ways different routes to getting themselves known. There's a three-piece band called the Garys, and they're from Saskatoon or nearby Saskatoon, and it's three sisters, and they recorded this album live in October of 2019 at the Roxy Theater, and it was a silent film, a silent movie, and they wrote a score for it and performed it live to the picture and recorded this record. And it's really cool. And they're normally very much kind of I don't know, they're a little bit surfy. You know, their previous record was called Surf Manitou, you know, as in Manitou Beach, out, you know, the lake out there.
I love it.
And they're kind of surfy, but it was the record was it just won an award. It won the Saskatchewan Music Awards for, I think, best alternative album. And just a really different way of kind of going about it. I just think it's kind of neat when artists try different things and try different routes. I mean, with the Pikes in the early days, yeah, I had to write letters to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. to get the list of all the college radio stations in the States. And once I got that, we put a kind of a mailing party together. And I mean, for days we all sat in the basement and physically put 2 copies each of the vinyl in a cardboard kind of package. And one thing that was a wise thing that we wouldn't have thought of is Robert Hodgins he was kind of acting as our manager in the early days, and he was our agent. And he suggested, why don't you put a self-addressed, self-stamped card, and when it goes to the radio stations, if they can put a comment in, or are they playing it, do they like it, whatever. And so we started receiving these cards back, and as a result, we sort of went on these mailing lists, and we started getting the charts back, and the record started charting, doing quite well at a lot of the college radio stations in the U.S. and in Canada. And that really kind of helped to, I think, get a little bit of interest from record labels. I mean, in those days, that was kind of there was an independent music scene, but it certainly wasn't as developed as it is now, where, you know, artists you can do an awful lot on your own, and there's a lot of information and stuff out there. But back then, the goal was to, I mean, we really didn't expect or plan or hope to ever sign with a record label. Our goal was to do independent albums and hopefully make them good enough and get enough popularity that a major label would distribute them for us. That was our realistic goal, is to get a distribution. So when we actually did get signed to Virgin Records, it was a huge and far, far beyond anything that we had anticipated or planned for. And it was, and I remember we signed just before Christmas of 1986. We played a gig at a place called the Copa, which was a nice club actually in downtown Toronto. And before we went on, our lawyer, Stephen Stone, was there, and we signed this big, it was like this thick of papers. It took forever, but we did that, and then we played the gig, and then we flew home. And I remember before we did, Doug Chappelle, the late Doug Chappelle, Doug just passed over a couple months ago, actually, but he was president of Virgin, and he signed us, and he brought us into the office there, and he had a big, kind of a huge case full of vinyl albums, and said, okay, just take whatever you want. And we were like, really? Like, he said, yeah, these are all Virgin artists, these are all promos. So we all went home with like big stacks of records, actually, back to Saskatoon for Christmas, and then came back and started recording just after. And that was Big Blue Sky.
Funny that you said it. You know what the scumbags in Age of Electric would do? Would take all that merch from different meetings at A&M and Universal, and then go right to the pawn shop and sell them. Not me. I would never do that. But those other scumbags.
Oh, I'm kind of
still in the plastic.
I've been
that's
there,
the big
to be
one.
honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it takes to survive, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anything for money.
You do what you got to do,
Anything for money. Hey, well done. The things we do for money. There you go.
Yeah.
There's a plug.
Things we do for money. You know what's funny?
You should use that title. Just
Yeah.
put it out there.
You know, they made a movie. There was a movie produced called Things I Do for Money.
Really?
And the writer and director and producer is a guy named Warren P. Sonoda, who has done literally hundreds of music videos, and I think he's done 11 feature films now. And so he did this movie, which was released. Well, it was supposed to do the festival circuit, and they actually had it going in some festivals through late 2019 into 2020. And anyway, because of COVID, everything changed, obviously. So they ended up doing a release, on the small screen last spring. But the movie's called Things I Do for Money, and I got to this was really fun because the movie itself stars two classical cellists, these two young guys, Max and Theo, and they are the plot line basically is they're classical cellists. One of them gets involved. Long story short, they get involved in organized crime. There is violence, and
wow, that's a jump from classical music into organized crime.
Yeah, by accident, a series of events sort of happen, and they get involved in this, and but they do the music score too. So it's basically two cellos all the way through. They do feature some songs from artists, and in the final credits of the movie, they play Things I Do for Money on the cello, and they got me to sing over top of that. So it was really quite fun. I got to actually go in, decades later and sing Things I Do for Money over these dueling cellos. And it was really, really fun, to do that. I just was not something I ever really had planned for or expected. But as you guys know, music's an adventure. And I mean, you never really know what can happen,
No.
Quite often it seems like nothing's going on. All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch going on out of the blue.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now we don't sleep for a while here because we get busy. And then as soon as things slack off, you're kind of going, you're relieved. And then for me, it's like a week later, I'm going, okay, when's the next thing coming up here?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You don't take advantage of the downtime when it comes. Like even during COVID, you're like, it took me weeks, maybe a month before I was kind of like out of that mode of like, I got to call somebody, I got to return an email, and like no one's expecting your call, no one's expecting your email. Just sit down and shut up. But yeah, that's 100% it. But it is funny, like a song you just make up on your couch one day with an acoustic guitar, sometimes missing a string, and you're kind of thinking, you're like, oh, this is just a little thing I made up. And the next thing you know, it's in a film and all that kind of stuff. It really does say the magic of music. It just can will outlive us. You know what I mean? Like the songs you write will be, once we're all dead and gone, these songs, they live on, and someone else is going to find one of your songs and record it and have a hit with it. And you're going to be like, wow, it just lives on forever. It's the only way to be immortal, is keep making music. Yeah.
And if you've lived through the video age, which you guys did, I think it's important because a lot of prairie bands, as we all know, being from the prairies, we focus on the music and the image is way less important. Although if you're lucky enough to have made videos, which you guys made a lot of great videos, that is kind of important for the band too, because the videos live on. And you probably, in your early days, were you envisioning like, oh, how are we going to represent ourselves on Much Music and all that? Because, that was a thing. It was very important. And that's definitely how I would always see you guys, was I was a Much Music junkie, and you guys were absolutely top of the pile when those videos were in rotation. And so you got to see if I didn't see you guys perform live, we were all kind of getting our road legs going at the same time. But you guys were not just on the radio, but you guys were on TV all the time too.
Exactly.
Well, Doug from Virgin, he recognized the importance of that, and Much Music was just really, really getting going in our era there. It had been on the air for a little while, but it was gaining in popularity, and there were a number of other video shows. I remember there was Video Hits and a few other shows along the way, and
Good Rockin' Tonight.
Yeah, Good Rockin' Tonight. It was so we ended up. I remember the first video we shot, and we had done some video stuff. There was a guy named Ken Adolph who was a local television producer here in Saskatoon, and he did kind of a half hour, kind of a special about the Northern Pikes. It was, and I think for him it was really fun to do something different. And they built these kind of sets where we did the songs. We had a little bit of experience in doing that, but I remember the first video was for Teenland, and that was and Ron Birdie, who ended up really directing and producing the lion's share of our videos. He did most of the videos that we did, and we had a good working relationship with him. And he seemed to just have a good knack of finding the right things. But it was really quite a big deal. We had never done anything on that scale where, okay, like you're wearing makeup and you've got like a big crew and there's lighting and all this kind of stuff, and we're just like little guys from the sticks here. Like we were sort of wow, really, but it's funny.
Were you filming those in? Sorry, Jake. Were you filming those in Saskatoon, or where did you get to film?
No, they were done in Teenland was done on a soundstage in Toronto. And the next one that we did though was Things I Do for Money, and we actually shot that near Drumheller at East Cooley, Alberta.
Wow.
And which was really quite a fun shoot, just for the fact that we were kind of on location, and and there was a theater group near there, Rosebud, a town Rosebud, and they had a summer theater thing going on. And Ron went to a play that was in Rosebud, and he found a couple of actors that he thought would be really good, and they ended up being in the video. The one guy, Doug, who kind of carries a bike around and through a bottle, and he ended up being in Kiss Me You Fool as well, and he sort of recurred in a couple of other videos along the way. And but that was a fun one to do on location. And that one, actually, weirdly enough, that song Things I Do for Money was our first single in the US, and it got picked up on MTV and got played pretty heavy for a couple of months there. And that was when we did our first tour down there in the fall of 1987, and the tour was called Foreplay. There were 4 bands on it. There was us and Charlie Sexton's younger brother, Will Sexton. They were Will and the Kill from Austin, and a band from Nashville called Royal Court of China, and then a band from Newcastle, England called Hurrah. And we shared a bus with Royal Court of China. It was packed. I mean, it was just band and crews. It was every spot was filled on that bus, and on coaches. And stuff
Was that anything to do with Virgin putting you together, or?
Well, no. Coors put the tour together, and it was through our agent got it for us down there. Our agent was with Creative Artist Agent, CAA was our agency in the U.S. And it's Bobby Brooks. It was really quite sad because he actually died in the helicopter crash with Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Oh wow! No.
And that was quite a big thing because he was in our corner, and he was trying to get us. We did some good opening slots down there through Bobby. Like we did a tour opening for Robert Palmer and a few other things along the way, and then Bobby was killed. It was just a horrible tragedy that happened, and that was
worst.
That had an impact on us for sure because we basically lost our agent and started with somebody else at that time. So that was, but yeah, it's the things that happen in life that are unexpected sometimes, But
I know. What a loss. I mean,
one of those things. Yeah, it's just.
So talk a little bit about, people are asking here too. Obviously, we know the name Northern Pikes. I mean, it's obviously, what's the parallel there? Were you guys? Was it more of a? Was there a story behind that? Where'd the name come from in terms of how do you relate that to a band name?
Yeah, well, our agent Robert. Because at the beginning, when we started out playing, our goal was to make money. We wanted to make enough money so we could finance independent recordings, because we figured that was our way to kind of get ourselves known. So we lived on very little on the road. We gave ourselves, we were trying to give everybody $7 a day to what you lived on. So
it's like slave labor.
Yeah, you can learn how to be a scavenger. You're always bumming smokes off people and get to buy you a drink at a bar and things like that.
It's good training for COVID because we're all living $7 a day now.
So but the the Northern Pikes. Well, so Robert, he kept saying, "Guys, I need a name so I can book the band. You've given me kind of a set list," and we were never really a good cover band. We had not a bad set list of songs, but that era was definitely a little more keyboard oriented, and so we were a little twangy for for the covers, but we pulled it off. We were able to get out and do the circuit, et cetera, and slither in our own songs, which was always the goal. But we needed a name. And so we went to a bar that night. I remember Brian and Merle and I just kind of sat there tossing out names all over the place. And then the next day we sort of came to the Northern Pikes. We liked the fact that it was, it indicated we were from Canada, and there was a bit of a Western quality to that. And, but it really, it was so stupid because a pike is a spear. A pike can be a highway, or it can be a mountain peak. But obviously, everybody always thinks of the fish.
Yeah.
That was the fish,
Yeah.
Because at the beginning we would go, well, it's not just a fish; it's this and this. Yeah, it's a fish. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So and it was always one of those things where we'll use this name till we find a good one. That was sort of
Right.
and it just stuck. After a while, it was like too much to change it, and it's sort of the first shirts actually that Virgin made, and somebody had one recently. They're really cool. They were these promo items that Doug had done, and the front was a fish, like the head of the fish coming like this, went down to the bottom of this shirt, and coming up the back was the tail coming up the back like that sort of thing.
I remember those shirts. I remember those
Yeah.
being around back in the day. Yeah.
Kind of a rarity now, I think, those ones, but they were at the end of it all, it's a fish. That's what it is,
Of course. So how did that work when we talking about the Beatles, as I'm assuming you're familiar with them, a rock band from England. Anyway, but when there's multiple vocalists in a band, I'm always curious because it's on purpose in the Beatles or Kiss, or where they you've put a band together with the intention of like, it's four different faces. It's, because I remember seeing Teen Land was massive in our little world and thinking like, oh, wow. And there's a new Pikes video. And I'm like, Jay sings this song? I was like, were you guys always a multiple vocalist band? Was it always a multifaceted type thing? I'm thinking I was too young to really have put together who was singing what on the first recordings. And then to watch it kind of go, bounce around like that until eventually Brian suddenly steps up to the mic and you're like, well, what's he doing now? You're like, but it was really an interesting take, and it really makes for different flavors along the way as you do that.
Well, at the beginning in the band, when the band first started, it's a weird thing, but I had surgery on my wrist, and I thought it would be not a big deal, but it turned out to be quite a big deal actually, and it took me about a year of healing before I could start. I had enough mobility to be able to play the bass again, to be able to get my hand back and around like that. So at the beginning of the band, we were a 5-piece band, and Merle was the lead singer, and I played guitar. And we had a guy named Glenn Hollingshead. Glenn's good friends. We still see him when we go out to the West Coast. There's a Victoria now, but there was, we were a 5-piece band, 2 guitars, bass, drums, and a singer. And then what ended up happening was we slowly started adding more of our own material in around the time that we did our second independent record. And we stopped getting, the gigs started drying up because we were put in that position of having to go, okay, are we going to be a circuit band, or are we going to try and establish ourselves as an original band? So we kind of had to kind of cut that cord to a certain extent. And so I started playing the bass again. But Merle was the lead singer, and I sang a little bit, and sometimes out of necessity, just because what ended up happening was during towards the end of our first year, Merle ended up developing nodes on his throat.
Oh. Yeah, sure.
He had to not sing for about 6 months.
Whoa.
So we did this other band. So Brian and I, and the drummer that we had at the time, Doug Lashinsky, we got together with a female singer, Salem Jones, and we had this band called The Torch, and we were kind of a cover band, but we did an opening set where we were kind of like a ZZ Top thing, where there was just the 3 of us without Salem, with cowboy hats and shades and playing, kind of blues rock kind of music. And that was really quite fun and a good way to sort of develop yourself a little bit better. By the time Merle started singing back with the band again, I was singing more. And I wrote, I guess, the lion's share of songs in the early days, but I always encouraged the other guys to write, because I always loved I love the Beatles, and I love bands where there are multiple singers and multiple writers, and that I just figured that gave longevity to bands, having multiple
Sure.
writers, singers, and so at the beginning, that's kind of what it was. And then we got to Big Blue Sky, and we were kind of dividing the vocals up a little bit more. And then, but our second record, which was Secrets of the Alibi, Brian started writing songs around that time. And he wrote a song called "Hopes Go Astray," which was a single, but he was still not comfortable with singing yet. So I ended up singing the song, although he does sing in the bridge. That was the first time he had ever really had his voice recorded. And then by the time Snow and June came out, which was 2 years later, he had been writing tons of songs. And what we used to do was we would exchange cassettes. We would just do little rough voice and acoustic type recordings. Sometimes people would use other instruments and make their demos a little more elaborate. But and I remember the tape that Brian gave me, and I was just knocked out because I was like, wow, he's written all these really cool songs here, and it was like really good. I felt great about that, just because I felt pressure, like I had to be the guy who went up with it. And it was like, oh, this is great that these guys are writing more now and stuff. And but I remember that one cassette, and he had about 6 songs on it, and most of those songs I think ended up on the Snow and June record. But the very last one on there was "She Ain't Pretty." And I remember when he gave me the tape, he said, well, oh, there's a song at the end there, and it's just kind of a goofy song. Just ignore that one, sort of thing. And I'm really curious about it. I wanted to kind of hear it, and so when I heard it, I was like, oh, this is a catchy song. It's kind of fun. And we had quite a discussion about that. And he said, well, I think it's too different for what it doesn't really sound like the Northern Pikes. Like, oh, Brian, you know what? I felt the same way with the song "Things I Do for Money." I just thought this is more like an atmospheric Pink Floydish style of song or something. I didn't feel like it was, necessarily along the sort of pop rock lines that we were. But the song ended up doing very well for us, and it created a whole other little dimension within the band. And so I said the same thing. I said, that song's different, but it could be kind of cool. So so he said, okay, well let's play it live and see what it's like when we perform it live. So we learned it, and then we played a gig, I believe, in Calgary, and they had to move it inside. It was supposed to be outside. They moved it into this kind of like a rink or an auction mart or something. It was really boomy and loud in there. But so we did our set, and then we went off the stage, and then we got called for an encore. So I said, okay, let's play the new one. So we played the new one, and literally by the second chorus, "She ain't pretty, she just looks that way," everybody was singing it. The people caught on to it right away. They just got it. And I remember we walked back to the dressing room. We're all looking at each other and going, maybe we should do a demo of that one. That might be a good one to do. And
the people have spoken.
It turned out to be a really big song for us. It turned out to be a big hit song. And it's still fun to play. Anytime you can get a reaction, out of people. And you guys know that when people react to your music, even if it's some song that you're kind of sick of playing, doesn't matter. It's fun to play when people sing along and really enjoy what you're doing. It's sort of
totally. And it was a groundbreaker video as well for you guys, right? I mean, the special effects in that scared a lot of little kids.
Yeah. Well, Doug Chappelle. Doug saw a commercial, and it was about an antihistamine or a cold medicine or something, and somebody sneezed, and it was like that kind of claymation thing. So he found out who did that and got them to do the video. But it was old school. I mean, there was no CGI, so it was single shots. It took weeks. I mean,
wow,
of moving very slightly, to create those moments within there. And the video was shot on a soundstage in Toronto. When you see the exterior and it looks like a cantina or something, that's a little model. That's just like little model thing there.
Oh wow.
And it was a fun video to do, and it did very well for us. And that was a single in the United States, and we had a good run with that down there. We had the 2 songs that seemed to do the best down there were "Things I Do for Money" and "She Ain't Pretty." And then but it was, once again, there's so many other factors involved. I mean, after we did our second record, "Secrets of the Alibi," and then we recorded "Snow and June." But the day "Snow and June" got released in Canada, the U.S. branch of Virgin drop the band off that label. So
Wow.
it's really weird, a weird thing. There were a lot of internal things going on that were, there was a lot of politics stuff happening, you know.
Right.
And,
I was going to ask about that actually, because a lot of the guests we've had on the show always talk about how they had a bad spot, were taken advantage of by management or the label or anything like that. Did you guys also experience that kind of thing, or did you, kind of come out of this unscathed?
You know, I feel like we were lucky. I mean, our managers were Fraser Hill and Ed Smeal, and Fraser was also the co-producer. Fraser with Rick Hutt worked on Big Blue Sky and Secrets of the Alibi and Snow in June. Although with Snow in June, we had a couple of other guys mix most of the record. We had Bob Clearmountain and Hugh Padgham each did 5 songs on Snow in June. Rick and Fraser did the other 3, or the other 5, because there were 2 that actually didn't make the record. But Doug was pretty cool. He was from Virgin Records. We always had a good relationship with him, and yeah, there's certain things along the way that you kind of go, maybe we should have done this or should have done that. But in the big picture, our experiences were pretty good overall. I didn't feel like we were, I didn't feel like we got necessarily, like ripped off, or in comparison to, friends in other bands from our era. You hear some of these really bad stories along the way where they just really were very dictated to and did not really have a lot of choice and that kind of thing. But we were kind of fortunate that way in terms of the relationship we had with the record label. And it's I didn't feel like we got, like I say, ripped off or anything. And we saw Doug, we did our Big Blue Sky 30th anniversary tour in 2017, and he had retired by then and had moved to Niagara Falls, and he came to the gig, and it was really fun to just kind of hang out with him because, he kind of knew us, from square one. But it's funny, that world, it's definitely, it's different now. I think the major record labels are still powerful and still exist. At the same time, you see an awful lot of artists that are able to make records at home and able to have a lot more control over their career. You hear stuff like Billie Eilish recording an album in her bedroom, and I think that's cool. I think it's really cool. I saw a great interview with is it Tom Lord Alge, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And they were asking him, they were kind of trying to get him to respond to Billie Eilish having recorded this record with her brother at home, and trying to, to get him. And he had a great attitude about it. He said, who cares where this was recorded? He said, it doesn't really matter. It's the only thing that matters is how it sounds and how you react to it as a listener. That's the only thing that matters at the end of it all. And I just thought that was kind of a cool thing. But like, for instance, the Pikes did a record in 2019 called Forest of Love, and that was we had that put out through Universal Music. So we still have, Virgin basically got usurped into EMI, which got usurped into Universal. So Universal still has our old catalog and that kind of thing. But COVID did some changes, obviously. That record came out in June of 2019. And we were kind of gearing up for last summer to be a busy summer, and being, the summer to really kind of work the album, because we are a summer band. We know that. We did a cross country tour in 2017, old school, get in the bus and go from coast to coast. But I don't know if I'd want to do it like that again. I like kind of doing it more in bits and pieces, I think, the old, but anyway, the things definitely kind of things are different than they used to be. Let's put it this way.
It's funny because in 2017, I ran into you at the airport in Regina, I think it was, and Age of Electric was playing. Our first show was in like 17 years or something like that. And you guys were doing your thing, and it was like this weird, like running into you guys was like, no way, hey, wow, Saskatchewan guys, and we were doing the same thing. We got on a bus in Vancouver and just worked our way east and back. It was like, it's such a cool thing to see that you guys do that. And so at that point, because now Merle is no longer part of the lineup. Now, how did that all come about? I know the ins and outs to some degree, but it's so weird to see like you're playing with Brian and Don, guys you've been playing with, you've known each other since, you know, before there was mortgages and wives and kids, you know, and then all of a sudden you're like still on a bus together going like, here we go, you know. But when Merle's leaving, what was is it just kind of like he's just had enough, or is that just...
Yeah, you know, I mean, we started in 1984. I guess we signed our record deal in late 1986, and then we put out 4 studio albums and a live album. And then literally in 1993, called it quits. It was really, I mean, in retrospect, I look at it and I go, maybe we should have just taken a break. But we were just, it's really hard to
done. Age of Electric took a break for 17 years. And now we're on another break.
We took a break for 7 years. I mean, we really,
there you go.
you know, we didn't want anybody to know about it. It wasn't supposed to be even made public. And then one of the second last gig that we did was in Winnipeg, and it was at the hockey rink where the Jets played. And somehow the word got out that day that the band was calling it quits. And it was
Winnipeg.
Some Winnipeg big mouth.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things. It was like, oh no, I don't want to talk about this. We just wanted to kind of gracefully exit and just vanish into the woodwork. But we had to actually talk about that. But I remember we were playing it. We sold out the show. We're kind of going, we're playing this hockey rink sold out, and I'm kind of going, why are we quitting anyway? Like we've kind of gotten to this point where we've finally gotten a pretty good audience going on here. It really. And then the next gig, the last one that we did before we broke up, was at a fair in Fort Francis, Ontario. It was totally anticlimactic because we went from the big hockey rink gig to this kind of like small town kind of fair.
Yeah.
And,
we've all done them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was
smells like hot dogs out here. Yeah.
It was fun, but Merle, we took a break, and then when we started again in 2000, or I guess late 1999. What happened was Virgin put out a best of album. It's called Hits and Assorted Secrets. And that was kind of the motivating factor. We thought, well, let's get in touch. Maybe we should do a tour and promote this record and have some fun with this. And we did have fun. It was really a fun tour. And we hadn't been hanging out with each other.
There it is.
What do you got there? Oh, yeah.
What does that say? Can't see it.
Hits and Assorted Secrets. Yeah.
Hits and Assorted Secrets.
Nice.
So we did the tour, and then we kind of continued playing. And what we tried to do, we recorded an album in 2000 called Truest Inspiration. We recorded it in Toronto with David Baxter producing, and we tried to kind of go out and be like full-time band, like on the road consistently. And we did that for a few months, and we kind of decided, no, I don't think we want to do this. It doesn't. You could just see the cracks starting to show, and it's like, okay, we're starting to fight again all the time, and this is not. We're not having fun, and it's Monday night in Slave Lake at the bar, and it's like half full, and you're kind of in some ways starting from scratch again. Once you've left for a while.
And a Saskatchewan band fight is the full like hockey jersey over the head, the underhand punching. It's terrible, folks.
Yeah,
gloves are off.
Yeah, the gloves are off, and
then you sit down and have a couple beers later.
And then you have a couple, and you visit each other, the dentist, the next day. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Merle, he slugged me and I deserved it too.
Wow.
We were playing in Dallas, Texas, and it was a Halloween gig in Dallas, and we were in this strange club that had kind of like a black light. The room we were playing, they had a bunch of rooms. It was very cavernous. It was quite a neat place, actually. And for some reason, Merle was having a bit of an off night, and he made a couple of mistakes. And I would kind of go over there, and I was kind of juicing him about it, and I just say, "Oh, nice one," or some stupid. I was just being a kind of a jerk. And then I think about the 4th or 5th time I went over there, he just sort of looked at me and went, "Oh."
On stage.
That's amazing. Can we see that on YouTube?
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice if it was out there. And then it sort of took me a minute or two to kind of shake it off, and then I got back up there. But it's funny with guys. I mean, and we finished this, the set, and Merle's, Well, sorry I slugged you, but you were being a jerk. And I kind of go, yeah, I deserved it. Okay.
Most Canadian man fight ever.
That's probably what it ended
I
up
deserved
being,
it. It's my fault. Yeah.
But
Isn't
no,
it funny how that's kind of a lost thing in the 21st century, isn't it? Like sometimes you deserve a pop in the nose, and that's you're not going to call your lawyer. It's like I deserve that. Yeah.
Well, Merle's a pretty strong guy. If he really wanted to do damage, he could have.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It was more like the mama bear swatting you away.
Exactly.
Mutilating you kind of thing.
Just giving you a warning.
No, he just got kind of tired of playing Merle, and it was 2005, and I remember we had a New Year's Eve gig offered to us in Brandon, and he just didn't want to go. And he was back. He was working full time for the city by then, and he just said, "No, I don't want to play." And we did. We wanted to play. The three of us did. So we did it as a trio.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we played for a number of years as a three-piece, just the three Pike guys. And then we had Ross playing with us as our fourth guy for a while, because he started playing with us back in Snow in June on that tour, because there was a lot of keyboards on that record. Yes, and I can see Corey's got, yes.
We should talk about Ross, because before we went on the air, we were discussing how when my band moved to Vancouver, my brother and myself and Shane Hendrickson, we had a trio. We were playing with Carson Cole. We talked about Carson last week, I think. And Ross Nikiforuk was the keyboard player for Carson. So after we left Carson, we were like, okay, now we got a band. We can do our original stuff. And now we're going to really take the world by storm. And only like a few weeks after we started doing our own thing, he gets the call from the Northern Pikes, and he became the keyboard player for you guys.
Yeah, he was in...
Just so you know, Jay, Corey talks about this all the time. The missed opportunity. And he's got like a dartboard of the Northern Pikes, just like
oh no.
Roses.
I'm ready for your apology, Jay.
Well, well, basically...
But what you're saying is the keyboard was the glue of that band, because he left and we never heard of it. So what's the...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We needed a keyboard player. We figured out, because we had... we had Garth Hudson play keys on a bunch of songs on Snow in June, and Rick had always played a little bit of keys on our records along the way. And Stan Celeste, great rock and roll piano player, he played on a couple of songs on the record. And we just came to the conclusion that we need a fifth person up here. We need a keyboard player. And there were a couple of people that I had actually approached that I knew. One guy was in Saskatoon, and he thought about it, but it didn't happen for him. And then there was another guy who was in another band, but I think he wanted more money than we could actually pay. And then I was thinking, who do I know? And I could remember seeing Ross play in another band that was, I think they were maybe called Hunting Party. And I remember he impressed me. What I really liked about him is he seemed like a smart keyboard player. Like he didn't overplay. He knew what to play at the right time. It was just one of those things where, you just felt like it was the right thing. So we really were kind of taking a chance. So I tracked him down, and I remember he called from the payphone in the lobby at the hotel on Vancouver Island. You guys were playing out there somewhere. And then, and I asked him
about,
like,
please save me from these jagoffs I'm playing with.
It was a strange, what was strange about it is I think it must have been a weird time for him too, because his wife had just had a baby.
Yeah.
Like literally had a little baby. And then they kind of packed up and came to Saskatoon and literally right into rehearsing. And we rehearsed like crazy for, I think, about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Actually, it was a kind of a neat spot where it's over kind of in the university area. Now it's like an art gallery and a restaurant there. But it was just kind of an empty room big empty room. And and Ross worked out really well. And I mean, for instance, we just said, well, we think we need accordion in this song, because Kiss Me You Fool and a couple other songs seemed like the accordion would work well. And he did not know how to play the accordion. He literally learned the accordion within a few days and got pretty good at it. And, I remember the first 3 gigs we did, we hit a lot of people actually, because the first gig was a big outdoor show and there was the Beach Boys and Trooper. Anyway, we played in the afternoon while the weather was still pretty good. It was really hot out. And then there was a storm, and actually a tornado rolled through there that night. And so they ended up kind of, I think the Beach Boys sort of fled for their lives off the stage or whatever when they were on stage. And so we played that in the day, and then we drove down to Moose Jaw and we played a cabaret that night. And then the next morning we drove to Regina and got on a plane. And the next day was Canada Day. Flew to Toronto and then drove up to Barrie in Molson Park. They had a kind of a big Canada Day kind of show happening. And so it was good. Like I say, it was a good kickoff to the record because there were two big festivals and the cabaret was kind of fun in the middle of all that. And then, so Ross had a real baptism of fire in some ways, you know. But yeah, I mean, with the Pikes, once Merle left, yeah, we were a trio for a while. Ross played with us for quite a while, and then something had happened and he couldn't make some gigs. So we played as a trio, and then we just kind of kept it as a trio again. And then with Kevin Kane from the Grapes of Wrath, he had recorded an album with Brian. So the two guys had done this record, Kane Potman.
Right.
And they had played a lot. They played a lot all over Canada. And we were looking at the possibility of this Big Blue Sky 30th anniversary tour. And we were talking about it the year before in 2016. And we thought, well, let's try Kevin. It was my suggestion. I said, Brian, you've been playing with him all along. And I'm a big Grapes of Wrath fan. And
Me too.
And I knew Kevin's a really, really good guitar player. Like he's really versatile and he can really play. And he's a very, very accomplished musician and singer.
Yeah.
And
songwriter.
Yeah, exactly. He's just a really talented guy and a nice guy too. You know, we all got along really well. The first show that we did was the Seneca Queen Theatre in Niagara Falls. And then the next day we played for Canada Day in Brantford. And that was interesting because it was funny. You were talking about something before there. And Tom Wilson, his previous band Junk House had kind of reformed, and they were playing there as well that day, as well as, I don't know, Teenage Head, a bunch of kind of bands from a bygone era. And I remember it was kind of raining, and I remember talking to Tom, and he had a great quote. It was funny. He was sort of he's pretty amazing talent, you know, and he's a great painter and artist, and he does everything. And I was chatting with him, and I said, Tom, man, I think it's just it's amazing how you do all these things. You've got about 4 different music acts, and you're a great painter and a great artist, and you do voiceovers and all that stuff. I said, well, it's just, you know, like I'm just amazed. I'm blown away by what you do there. And he sort of goes, yeah, anything for $1. I just thought it was a great reply. You know, he was self-deprecating, you know, a really humble guy, you know, sort of thing. Because
Kevin Kane is the reason. Kevin Kane was my very first acoustic show. Kevin asked me to. A bunch of us are getting together down at the Railway Club. We're playing, you know, whatever it was some sort of theme thing. And I was like, I mean, Kevin's one of those guys because when we thought of the Grapes of Wrath, we thought they looked like $1 million. Their songs were great. They always seemed way too cool to be talking to like jackasses like me. But he was always so friendly and so forthcoming. And he was like, come play. And I was like, I'll be there. Click. That's back when you could hang up a phone. And I was like, I've never played an acoustic show. Like I always stood on stage with loud guitars and drums, but I literally walked on stage with an acoustic guitar and sang some songs. And I've done that, you know, ever since. And it was so Kevin's fault, basically. Sorry to anybody who doesn't enjoy that. If you don't like it, it's Kevin's fault. But yeah, no, it's he's an amazing dude. And please say hello for me if you get a chance. I've lost touch with him over the years. So
yeah, well, he's been he and his wife have a fur baby. So almost any time I talk to him, he's walking with his dog around the neighborhood.
Is he still in Vancouver area or
he's in Toronto? He's been
he's in Toronto now.
About 10 years now.
Are you the only one that's in Saskatchewan now?
Yeah, we're spread out. I mean, that's why, you know, we haven't really been able to do any online shows during COVID or anything because I'm here in Saskatoon. Donnie is in the West Coast. He's just outside of Chilliwack, a place called Harrison Mills. Sure. And Kevin's in Toronto, and Brian is in Nova Scotia. He's in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia.
Is he? What brought him out there?
You know, he
met a girl.
Yeah, well, he got remarried, and they were looking at trying to get out of Toronto. They were looking at the possibility of going somewhere else. So they had thought about, you know, going to Niagara, and his wife Kate, her daughter was starting school at Dalhousie in Halifax.
Wow.
So they had spent some time out there, and they just really kind of fell in love with it, and ended up moving. They have a beautiful house. You can, it's overlooking the bay. And Brian has
It's amazing out there. It
recording
really is
studio
like,
in his-
yeah,
he's
beautiful.
had a recording studio built in his backyard. It's really nice, and
yeah.
it's a beautiful part. And we were actually recording there. We're kind of in the middle of an album, the Pikes. I guess in the
Cool.
fall of 2019, we started working on a record that was going to be kind of stripped down kind of versions of at least some of the songs from Snow in June. So it was going to be kind of like the campfire version of Snow in June. But
Cool.
as with the Northern Pikes, as with every record that we've done, it started to become a little more elaborate as we went on. But we were working with a guy named John Adams, who's a great engineer and producer out in Mahone Bay, which is not far from Lunenburg. And he's got a cool studio, and we made a good dent on it. We recorded for a couple of weeks out there. We were working for a couple of weeks, and then I think Kevin went back and did a little more work with Brian there right before COVID happened. And then literally, I can remember so clearly because I played in Saskatoon, actually with Belle Plaine and with Earl Pereira. And it was a thing for CBC. There's a weekend show called Saskatchewan Weekend. And what they had kind of a contest where people would write in and talk about things that had happened, events that had occurred in their lives or that kind of thing. And they wanted us to pick one of these and write a song about it.
Right.
So, actually, Earl wrote two. But then what we did is it was recorded. So you played a small set. You played a few songs, including this brand new one that had never been played before. It was quite nerve-wracking, actually. I was really nervous, and I had a music stand because I couldn't remember the words. But it turned out okay. It was actually the story that I wrote about was basically a farmer who had a UFO encounter, or who knows what it was. It was a very strange thing that occurred, but it changed his life. It totally changed his life, and the story really, made a mark with me. So I wrote the song. Anyway, that was the night before the Junos. It was kind of a pre-Juno event on the Wednesday night before everything was supposed to start in March of last year. And then the next day, everything was canceled and stuff. It was such a weird time. I did a writing session with a friend of mine named Adrian Sutherland. There's a band called Midnight Shine. And he lives up in Northern Ontario. But he was like many other people that had come out, and all of a sudden everything's canceled. So there was just such a confusing time. I just remember that I'll just remember the date quite clearly just from, because I played that gig, and it was really quite a fun gig. But even at the gig, I remember just sort of normally you'd come up to friends and give each other a hug, or and I remember Belle was there with her husband Blake, and it was like, what do we do? Like, do we touch elbows, or do we kind of? It was a strange thing. We're all still trying to figure it out.
I know. It's such a strange thing. So before we've kept you so long, but I really want to just quickly touch on Due South and some of the other that how does something like that come about? Like doing actual, is it actual score? Like I'm so fascinated by this world because Corey's done some of this, and I'm always fascinated by how that comes about, how that works. How long did Due South seem to went on for quite a while, didn't it?
Yeah, it was over the course of 5 years the show happened.
That's a long time.
And they did a pilot movie in 66 episodes, which was enough to syndicate it. So syndication means you can sell the whole package, like the whole series.
Great.
And like it's, it can be playing every day on a certain channel and that kind of thing. But how did it come about? Well, it was kind of a Forrest Gump thing because the band had broken up, and I was back in Saskatoon, and I got a call kind of out of the blue by our agent who said there's a producer, and he's a big fan of my writing and wants to know if I'd want to try and write a potential kind of theme song for this show. And she started explaining to me what the show was about. it was like about a Mountie from up in the Yukon, and his father.
Don't you wish it was something like Batman, like the song Batman? Yeah, Batman. I always say I wrote the lyrics to that song. It's like, what is this song called, or what's the show called? Okay, great. Watch. 20 seconds later, I send them the demo, and I make $1 million. Anyway, no, go ahead.
Such a fun song to play. We used to play that actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I know. But so the Due South, the actual Due South, the Due South actual theme song is a whole other production, though. I don't mean to demean that by saying,
Yeah,
you didn't just say Due South, na 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 Due South. Missed opportunity, Jay.
Yeah. So he called about this, and I started writing down ideas. It was one of those things, like some songs have taken me like 10 years to finish. And this one was really quick. She was telling me this thing, and I just had ideas rolling in my head. I started writing down some words, and I had a chord structure in my head, and I couldn't wait to get off the phone because I felt like I had this song ready to come out.
Wow.
And so it happened really quickly, and I don't think there were even any edits in it. It was rare. It's most of my songs I need to go back and edit things and change along the way. And so the theme song happened like that, and just by fluke, because we had broken up. We'd been broken up by fluke. Brian happened to be in town, and he was visiting his mother because he was living in Toronto by then.
Mm-hmm.
And Donnie had his recording studio at his house, and I thought, well, why don't I just do a demo here, and I'll see if these guys want to play on it. So that the original recording of Due South is Brian and Ross and Donnie and myself.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Secret Pike song.
Yeah, well, we did the recording, and I sent it in. I didn't really hear anything back for quite some time, so I sort of almost forgot about it. And then I got a call out of the blue, and they said, well, they really liked the song that you did, and they want to know if you're interested in trying to write some score, the background music. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know. I said, well, sure, I'll try it. I don't know what to do. So they sent me a VHS tape that had visual time code on the bottom, and I wrote a few pieces of music and went back to Donnie's place, just recorded all the instruments myself this time, and recorded these 3 pieces of score. There were 3 different scenes, and then I sent that off, indicating, well, it's this music cue starts here and ends here, looking at the numbers, like it was very, very rough around the edges, but I had a big learning curve to go through. But anyway, I sent it in, and then out of the blue, I got a call, and they just said, well, okay, they really like what you're doing, but they know you're an inexperienced film composer. They want to hook you up with some experienced people, and we need you to go to Toronto like tonight. I was like, really? I didn't want to go. I remember I was just sort of like, I was a little bit kind of upset that they had, they were demanding that I show up on such short notice. And then I thought, well, what do I got to lose? So they paid for the ticket and put me in a hotel. So I flew out literally that night, and then had a meeting the next day. It was a spotting session. I had no idea what that even was, but what it is when you watch the finished show, and you're with the producer and the director and a bunch of the people from the show, and the composers are, they're indicating, well, being indicated, okay, we want some music. We think music should start here and should go here, and we want it to feel kind of like this. And but they gave us lots of leeway, and that was the first time I had met the 2 guys that became the co-composers, John McCarthy and Jack Lenz. And interestingly enough, I didn't know it at the time, but Jack had roots from Saskatchewan. And he had moved out to Toronto when he was, I think, 19. And he ended up hanging around this place called the Riverboat, which was a popular kind of folk club at the time, and ended up hooking up with Seals and Crofts. And through a number of circumstances, he ended up going to LA and played with Seals and Crofts for a number of years. And then he ended up playing with Loggins and Messina for a number of years. And then I think by then he had a kind of a young family, and they decided to come back to Canada. So they ended up going to Toronto. But I learned a lot from those guys. Jack and John were just really, really accomplished. Jack has won an award recently for, I think, the most his music has been played the most of any composer in the last 50 years on Canadian television, I think.
Wow. That's
when,
amazing.
when John McCarthy moved to LA, it's sort of in the middle, there was a bit of a break. We'll see with Due South. What ended up happening was we started on the pilot movie. So I was back and forth 3 times. We did they edited it and it did edits in it. And so as a result, you had to kind of change the music. And it was very acoustic guitar heavy. That was sort of the vibe of the thing, which was I guess indicative of the northern kind of quality of what was going on with it. And it was a lot, things that happen really quickly in TV. I was used to the Northern Pikes where, okay, we're going to do acoustic guitars today. So that means you'll do like 3 or 4 tracks over the course of a number of hours kind of thing. And
right.
with the TV show, with the pilot movie, it's like, okay, we have a 3-hour session booked to record all of the acoustic guitar, which was like 40 music cues over the course of, a 2-hour movie kind of thing. So I had to learn quickly. I had to develop skills pretty quickly along the way. There was lots of things that I didn't know that I learned because of working with the guys. And I think maybe they learned maybe a little bit through me too, because I came from a very singer-songwriter background, And so I kind of looked at things a different way. And the way I've worked on any other TV shows or films that I've worked on ever since then is its feel. It really goes by feel. And those guys really taught me that too, because the first thing that we would do when you would look at the show, once it had been spotted, you'd sit in the studio and the first thing that we always did was try and find a tempo for a scene, depending on what it was. So you're just feeling it. You're just sitting there and you're just feeling it and you're kind of noodling away, but you don't play right away. You just you try to absorb it and find the right spot, find the right tempo. And we could, amazingly, between the 3 of us, with John and Jack and I, we would zoom in. We could find that kind of magic pace that would work. Wow. And then you'd set up the cue and it would record, rough versions of the acoustic guitar. And I recorded all of my parts so I wouldn't forget them. It really evolved. It was interesting to see the technology evolve in that show, because when I first started working on the show, the final mix was done at Deluxe, where they mixed a lot of films and TV shows in Toronto. And the mixer, Al Ormrod, who's still a really good friend, actually. And we stay in touch. And in fact, possibly they were going to get, he and his wife or his partner were going to get married last summer, and they had to postpone. And I'm supposed to play music at their wedding, which would be really fun. So I guess we're going to find out whether it's going to happen this year or not. They had to postpone for a year, but anyway, what they first had when they were mixing, they had 2 MCI 24-track, 2-inch analog tape machines.
Right.
And that's what it was. So it was basically 48 tracks, and everything was analog. That was on the pilot movie. And then the first season was the same setup. By the time we went to the second season, they had switched to Tascam D88s, and they had a bunch of those machines there. Mm-hmm. And then by the time we got to the last 2 seasons, the last 26 shows, after a break of almost not quite a year, but many months, then they decided to go in and do enough to syndicate the show. By then, everything went digital, and it was all Pro Tools. So, which was much easier, because one of my jobs as a composer was to drop the music in. So, and generally we would be working late. It's just like making a record. Except every week or 2, you do this and you stay up for the last couple of days, making sure everything sounds good, and you're mixing it and doing all the stuff you got to do. And then early in the morning, the day of mixing, it was a 2-day mix at Deluxe. I would come in with the music and sit with Steve Barden or whoever was dropping it in there at like 6:30 in the morning. And generally I hadn't slept because we've been working until like an hour before. And then we would just drop the music in, and it was great because you knew with Pro Tools, the accuracy level was there. Like you knew you were going to have it right in the right spot.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where when you're scoring things, sometimes close is okay, but more than anything, you want to be dead on. If you wrote it a certain way, I mean, you've got, 1/30th of a second to work with. And, and one thing that's different for me too, that I was so used to counting in fours all the time. You know, being in pop music, it's always 1, 2, 3. You know, occasionally there's a 3, 4, or 6, 8 kind of thing.
Sure.
But with this, all of a sudden you're not thinking like that, especially if you're scoring to the picture. If there's a chase scene going on or something like that, you really have to get out of that thinking of fours, because you're chopping it up. It's like doing math, and I've never been very good at math, but I had to kind of learn to figure that stuff out along the way. But it was, I guess with Due South, I guess I was in the right place at the right time, and I took the opportunity and learned from it. And it was a big learning curve. And I have to say, it was stressful. That first season was a lot of work, and it was a new show, and everything's on the line, and you're trying to kind of, trying to do your best, and you want it to be really good. And, our boss, Paul Haggis, was just a really smart guy. And I mean, he's gone on since, he had won Emmy Awards before that for various things that he'd worked on. And since then he's won Oscars. I mean, he did a movie called Crash that he directed. And he actually, I think he won Oscars for other things as well. I don't remember what all, but anyway, a super smart guy, and he remembered everything too. So
yeah. Were you in Toronto during all this? Did you have to kind of travel up? So you would go to Toronto for how long would you go to Toronto for a season?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first season, I mean, when the pilot movie was done, it was back and forth. I would go back and forth. I think 3 times we went out there with various edits, and then we'd have to go back and record certain things. And then when it came time for the first season, I kind of went out on my own. I was married with little kids at the time. And so my ex-wife now, but my wife at the time came out with kids to Toronto, and we lived there. We lived in an apartment. And then it didn't look like the show was going to go again. It was sort of one of those things where they didn't know whether it was going to get picked up or what. So we went back to Saskatoon, and then pretty much as soon as we got there, we found the show's going to happen again. And my wife at the time was pregnant with my youngest daughter, Olivia. And so what I did, she didn't really want to come back to Toronto at that time because of that. So I flew back and forth. I was kind of commuting back and forth, which was a lot of work and really not the greatest situation. And, I had a rental apartment that I stayed at, that kind of thing. And, but it was, and then it was kind of weird because my youngest daughter was she was very sick as a baby. She had a respiratory illness, and she was in the hospital for a number of weeks. And it was a strange and stressful time. But the time we did, so we did 18 shows for the second season. So we were up to 40 shows because there was 22 the first season, 18 the second. And it got picked up as a mid-season replacement when it first got on the air, it was on CBS. That's where the pilot movie played, and that's where the first season was. And then CBS, I don't know, there was some wrangling going on, and they weren't going to do a second season, but they did. So it ended up going on air as a mid-season replacement, Due South, on CBS. And then I came back to Saskatoon when that finished because it looked like it was just going to be done. And then lo and behold, I got a call, about 7 or 8 months later from Jack. John he'd moved down to LA. He had a green card, and he's lived there ever since in Hollywood. But Jack said, looks like they're going to go. Are you up for it? And I said, yeah, I would love to. And he said, well, you have to be out here. We can't have commuting anymore. And I said, yeah, that's for sure. So we moved out to Toronto again and lived for, I guess, about a year out there with the full family. And that was good. That was a pretty good time of work, how I would describe it. But yeah, well, and since then I've done, it's funny, Christopher Plummer just passed away. And I think one of the early movies that I worked on was a movie called The Dinosaur Hunter, where I worked as a composer, and he was actually in that movie. He came up to, I think they shot it in Alberta, and cool. He came up for a few days and they shot his stuff. But it was sad to see him go there. I mean, it was sort of one of those things. I didn't meet him or anything like that. I just worked on the movie.
91 years old. He had a good run.
Well, what's funny though is when you work on TV shows, like for instance, Due South, I mean, you're very absorbed. The one thing I found when I've worked on TV series, they take over your life. You can't do other things. You can't. For me,
Of course, yeah.
I couldn't do other things. I was trying to. For a while, I was trying to do two TV shows, and I had a record out. My first solo record was out, and it was just like overload, and I couldn't do it. So I've realized since then, if I ever do work on a series, I have to sort of make that the whole focus. And the last series I worked on was a number of years ago now, and that was called Dust Up. It was a reality documentary show about crop dusting pilots, and it was fun. Actually, it was fun to work on the show. I really enjoyed it. And so it's really it's one of those things. It's just a skill that I've had to learn. I guess I got spoiled because when I first started working on Due South, I mean, we had really, really good programmers and recording engineers that we work with.
Right.
And so as a result, I never really got my skill set up in terms of that kind of stuff. John knew how to do that really well. And Jack generally was working with programmers and recording engineers. But these guys were so good, so that when I tried to do it, I was trying to teach I did a couple of Pro Tools courses. I went down and did one in Dallas, and then another one in Chicago, and I learned stuff, but I never had the up-to-date systems, and I never really got that good or that fast at it. And it was really, in some ways, sort of frustrating because things that would take me 10 minutes to do, I could see some of the other people I work with, it would take them 10 seckends to do. Like they were on the ball and so quick. And you know who's really good at that now is Ross. And Ross and I worked on a lot of those shows together, actually. A lot of the TV movies and films, like after Due South and in between in that zone there.
You just like rubbing it in Corey's face. I love it.
Shut up.
Hey, Corey, I saw you jumping. I saw you with Shania Twain, and that was a fun concert. I remember I took my daughter, and that was her first concert with Shania.
All right.
And you were great. You were.
How'd you get in? Corey had you blocked off the list.
You guys did that thing where you sort of jumped into the stage. And
that's right. That was so that was the Up tour. That was 2003 or 2002, I think, right?
Yeah.
Saskatoon? Did you see us in Saskatoon?
Yeah. Did you land? Did you land on a beanbag or what? When you
jumped?
So
that was the part of the show where she did a costume change, and so we were all up. It was in the round. The whole stage was in the center of the arena, and we were on this top level, and a hole would appear in the top level. And at that point in the show, each member of the band would introduce the next person in the circle.
That's right.
While she was changing her clothes. So I would say, hey, this is Andy. He's from Australia. He's the bass player. And then I'd say some joke. And then I'd give the mic to him. And then I would fall into the hole, right? And of course, there was a big, soft landing for us in there. But it was just kind of a way for us all to change and for her to change and to introduce the band at the same time. So that's what that was.
Wow.
It was cool. I just thought
I think I said, yes, that's true. My name is Corey Churko, and I'm from Saskatchewan. And a lot of people think that the Christmas, or I would say Saskatchewan is God's country. And a lot of people thought that the Christmas story could have happened there if they could have found three wise men or a virgin.
Wow.
Well, that was my big joke.
I'm offended.
And this is a good segue too, because I know, Jay, we've taken up a lot of your time, but we want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been a blast, and safe to say, between TV, movies, Northern Pikes, always on the lookout for that next big hook. We have the most Canadian show, and the only possible way that we could end this is if you could do the most Canadian thing and give Corey that apology that he's been waiting for robbing him of his household name rights.
We sincerely apologize for stealing Ross. Back in 1990.
Wow.
Canadian.
That's clickbait right there. That's clickbait.
That was perfect.
Yeah. I think, Jay, you should consider Corey, because speaking of TV stuff, Corey, you did do the latest Beavis and Butthead right there in your studio, right? You guys.
Bill and Ted.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Bill and Ted. And
3, yeah.
And I think here's a good opportunity for Jay and Corey to make good and work together on some TV stuff.
Hey,
that'd be awesome. Maybe someday we'll do something together.
You bet. You bet.
I think
Yeah.
your stuff is on
Todd, there's a ton of
YouTube.
people asking about that mask in the background there. Is that wearable? That
Which
werewolf mask?
in that werewolf? That's
Yeah.
that somebody gave me that. It's some sort of Halloween werewolf mask. Yeah.
Can you put it on? There's a lot of people looking to see if that'll fit you.
It's mounted there in a weird
Oh,
way.
Okay. Well, they were
It's
willing to
mount-
pay for it, so
It's
there you
mounted
go.
on
I
my
had to
sex
try.
swing. It's a whole other thing. I don't want to talk about. This
Hey,
is my
guys.
man cave. I can do whatever I want.
Anybody, they're messaging me like crazy, so I had to ask. But on that note, we want to thank you for coming on the show, and of course, want to thank everybody for tuning in. It's been a blast, and we will see you here again, same time next week. Are you guys gone, or are you back next week?
We're here
I know-
next week.
we're on
We
next
have
week.
Jay. We have Ivan from Men Without Hats next week. How crazy is that?
Oh, excellent.
There you go.
That's gonna
You
be
know what?
fun. Yeah,
I was in the band.
He
I was
may or may
in-
not have his hat. I'm not sure.
we're
The
hoping he
band
has a
I was in
hat.
before-
I have a mask for him though. It's right there.
Yes.
But go ahead. What are you gonna say, Jay?
Well, I was just going to say the band I was in before the Northern Pikes was a band called 17 Envelope, and we did 2 shows opening for Men Without Hats
There you go. Wow. Yeah.
in Regina and Saskatoon. And
Wow.
they were cool. You know, it was weird.
They were-
They didn't have a drummer. They would use
Drum
programmer or Lynn drums or something at the time. And,
Right.
but they were good. They were a good band.
Yeah. I mean, that you forget how massive that whole safety dance thing is. Down here, it's a hit. You know, around the world, you go and people know that song. So there you go.
Oh yeah, for
It'll be
sure.
fun. It'll be fun. We get around, and maybe we can make him apologize for something. We'll
Yeah.
see. What
Okay,
Yeah, make
guys,
sure
on
you-
that note,
Say hi to Ross for me, by
I
the way.
will. I will. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
guys. It's been a lot of fun chatting today. It's been
Absolutely.
great. Great
Thank
talking to you
you,
guys.
Jay.
Yeah, we enjoyed it, Jay.
Everybody stay
love.
safe. Stay cool.
All right.
Yeah, you
guys.
for sure,
See
man.
everybody
Take
next
care.
week.
Good luck.
All right.
Big love.
Bye.
Peace. Now we get to talk about